The Kitemaker by Ruskin Bond. There was but one tree in the street known as Gully Ramnathan, ancient banyan that had grown through the cracks of an abandoned mosque. And little Ali's kite had caught in its branches. The boy, barefoot and clad only in a torn shirt, ran along the cobblestones of the narrow street to where his grandfather sat, nodding dreamily in the sunshine of their back courtyard. "Grandfather!" shouted the boy. "My kite has gone!" The old man woke from his daydream with a start and, raising his head, displayed a beard that would have been white had it not been dyed red with mehndi leaves. "Did the twine break?" he asked, to know that kite twine is not what it used to be. "No, grandfather, the kite is stuck in the banyan tree." The old man chuckled. "You have yet to learn how to fly a kite properly, my child, and I am too old to teach you. That's the pity of it. But you shall have another." He had just finished making a new kite from bamboo paper and thin silk, and it lay in the sun, firming up. It was a pale pink kite with a small green tail. The old man handed it to Ali, and the boy raised himself on his toes and kissed his grandfather's hollowed-out cheek. "I will not lose this one," he said. "This kite will fly like a bird." And he turned on his heels and skipped out of the courtyard. The old man remained dreaming in the sun. His kite shop was gone, the premises long since sold to a junk dealer, but he still made kites for his own amusement and for the benefit of his grandson, Ali. Not many people bought kite these days. Adults disdained them, and children preferred to spend their money at the cinema. Moreover, there were not many open spaces left for the flying of kites. The city had swallowed up the open grassland that had stretched from the old fort's walls to the river bank. But the old man remembered a time when grown men flew kites and great battles were fought, the kites swerving and swooping in the sky, tangling with each other until the string of one was severed. Then the defeated but liberated kite would float away into the blue unknown. There was a good deal of betting, and money frequently changed hands. Kite flying was then the sport of kings, and the old man remembered how the Nawab himself would come down to the riverside with his retinue to participate in his noble pastime. There was time, then, to spend an idle hour with a gay, dancing strip of paper. Now everyone hurried, in a heat of hope, and delicate things like kites and daydreams were trampled underfoot. He, Mehmood, the kite maker, had, in the prime of his life, been well known throughout the city. Some of his more elaborate kites once sold for as much as 3 or 4 rupees each. At the request of the Nawab, he had once made a very special kind of kite, unlike any that had been seen in the district. It consisted of a series of small, very light paper discs trailing on a thin bamboo frame. To the end of each disc, he fixed a spring of grass, forming a balance on both sides. The surface of the foremost disc was slightly convex, and a fantastic face was painted on it, having 2 eyes made of small mirrors. The disc, decreasing in size from head to tail, assumed an undulatory form and gave the kite the appearance of a crawling serpent. It required great skill to raise this cumbersome device from the ground, and only Mehmood could manage it. Everyone had heard of the dragon kite that Mehmood had built, and word went round that it possessed supernatural powers. A large crowd assembled in the open to watch its first public launching in the presence of the Nawab. At the first attempt, it refused to leave the ground. The disc made a plaintive, protesting sound, and the sun was trapped in the little mirrors, making of the kite a living, complaining creature. Then the wind came from the right direction, and the dragon kite soared into the sky, wriggling its way higher and higher, the sun still glinting in its devil eyes. And when it went very high, it pulled fiercely on the twine, and Mehmood's young sons had to help him with the reel. Still, the kite pulled, determined to be free, to break loose, to live a life of its own. And eventually, it did so. The twine snapped, the kite leaped away toward the sun, sailing on heavenward until it was lost to view. It was never found again, and Mehmood wondered afterwards if he made too vivid, too living a thing of the great kite. He did not make another like it. Instead, he presented to the Nawab a musical kite, one that made a sound like a violin when it rose in the air. Those were more leisurely, more spacious days. But the Nawab had died years ago, and his descendants were almost as poor as Mehmood himself. Kite makers, like poets, once had their patrons, but no one knew Mehmood, simply because there were too many people in the gully and they could not be bothered with their neighbors. When Mehmood was younger and had fallen sick, everyone in the neighborhood had come to ask after his health. But now, when his days were drawing to a close, no one visited him. Most of his old friends were dead, and his sons had grown up. One was working in a local garage, and the other, who was in Pakistan at the time of the partition, had not been able to rejoin his relatives. The children who had bought kites from him 10 years ago were now grown men, struggling for a living. They did not have time for the old man and his memories. They had grown up in a swiftly changing and competitive world, and they looked at the old kite maker and the banyan tree with the same indifference. Both were taken for granted, permanent fixtures that were of no concern to the raucous, sweating mass of humanity that surrounded them. No longer did people gather under the banyan tree to discuss their problems and their plans. Only in the summer months did a few seek shelter from the fierce sun. But there was the boy, his grandson. It was good that Mehmood's son worked doors by, for it gladdened the old man's heart to watch the small boy at play in the winter sunshine, growing under his eyes like a young and well-nourished sapling, putting forth new leaves each day. There is a great affinity between trees and men. We grow at much the same pace, if we are not hurt or starved or cut down. In our youth, we are resplendent creatures, and in our declining years, we stoop a little. We remember, we stretch our brittle limbs in the sun, and then, with a sigh, we shed our last leaves. Mehmood was like the banyan, his hands gnarled and twisted like the roots of the ancient tree. Ali was like the young mimosa planted at the end of the courtyard. In 2 years, both he and the tree would acquire the strength and confidence of their early youth. The voice in the street grew fainter, and Mehmood wondered if he was going to fall asleep and dream, as he so often did, of a kite so beautiful and powerful that it would resemble the great white bird of the Hindus, Garud, God Vishnu's famous steed. He would like to make a wonderful new kite for little Ali. He had nothing else to leave the boy. He heard Ali's voice in the distance, but did not realize that the boy was calling him. the voice seemed to come from very far away. Ali was at the courtyard door, asking if his mother had as yet returned from the bazaar. When Mehmood did not answer, the boy came forward, repeating his question. The sunlight was slanting across the old man's head, and a small white butterfly rested on his flowing beard. Mehmood was silent. And when Ali put a small brown hand on the old man's shoulder, he met with no response. The boy heard a faint sound, like the rubbing of marbles in his pocket. Suddenly afraid, Ali turned and moved to the door, and then ran down the street shouting for his mother. The butterfly left the old man's beard and flew to the mimosa tree, and a sudden gust of wind caught the torn kite and lifted it in the air, carrying it far above the struggling city into the blind blue sky.